Hi, everybody out there. I want to welcome you to this third edition of our Sacred Conversations series during the time of Corona. I hope that all of you are out there doing well, or as well as can be. I hope that you're staying safe. I hope that you're staying mostly indoors, but maybe getting outdoors sometimes too, but practicing social isolation. All to say, I hope you're well, and thanks for joining us again for this sacred conversation. As you can tell, we've had to move our location for these conversations. We've chosen to move them indoors, simply because, or rather not move them indoors, but move them to our own spaces, simply because of the ongoing needs of social distancing. We began this series a few weeks ago with the conviction that in addition to all of the material needs around us that need to be met, we would all need to access the deepest parts of our emotional and our spiritual lives to get through this crisis with our humanity intact. But I also think it might be possible not only to preserve our humanity, but to strengthen it by hearing from some of the wisdom keepers in our midst who can point us toward resources that we all might need to access right now. Over the past several weeks, David Good and Carleen Gerber shared stories learned from our many partnerships here at FCCOL. And then last week, David and Carrie Walker spoke to us about effective practices to uphold our emotional and our physical well-being in this anxious time. And today, we have the extraordinary privilege of visiting with Marilyn Nelson, who has been the poet laureate of the state of Connecticut. She has published dozens of volumes of poetry, among them her collection called the Meetinghouse, which most of you are familiar with, I think, about the history of our community here in Old Lyme. She is a teacher, she is a member of our community, but most of all, she is a friend to me and to many people in our community. So Marilyn, welcome to this sacred conversation, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of it. I know that back when we first talked about it, you had some reluctance about joining us for this, but I understand, and thank you for agreeing to do it.
Thank you for inviting me, Stephen.
You are welcome. Yeah. Well, listen, I want to frame this conversation by noting the connection within our faith tradition between poetry on one hand and crisis on the other. I think it's not an accident that the final book of the Bible happens to be a poem. Legend has it that it was written by John the Evangelist from his own sequestration on an island after he had been banished by the Roman authorities to a cave on this island. And it's a poem that grapples with disaster, even as it ends with a profound image of consolation. So I don't mean to open a discussion about the book of Revelation here, but I think it's just worth pointing out that the genre that writer chose in that moment was poetry. And then I also think, thinking about other moments throughout our faith tradition, that in the Hebrew scriptures, we don't find much by way of direct history of the exile, but we do find poems written by the major prophets. And in that time of anxiety and struggle, it was poetry that they needed, not prose. And then to just bring the examples a little bit closer to home, I know a favorite poem or poet of all of the members of our ministry staff here at the church is Wendell Berry. And he wrote a book some time ago called Standing by Words. And I think in times of trouble and crisis, some of the most important things available to us to stand upon as a firm foundation in our lives are words, and specifically poetic words. Mm-hmm. And so following the lead of the Bible, it might be that poetry is precisely what we need in these days, in addition to food, in addition to medical care, in addition to prayer and all the rest. It might be that poems are what we need. So Marilyn, again, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I guess I just want to start by asking, how are you at this point? And what are things like? And what are things like in your house? And how are you getting through the days? What's it like for you?
Like many of my friends, I can say that I'm used to being alone. This is my mode of living, to be a kind of a hermit.
Yeah.
And I've talked to several other poets, really, who've said the same thing. This is who I am. And so we are among the lucky ones who haven't had to adjust that much to being cooped up alone. I mean, one of the greatest joys you can give to a poet is a residence in an artist colony where they can go in and close the door.
Yeah.
At Yaddo, probably the best known artist colony in the country, you have breakfast and then they give you a lunch pail with your lunch and you go to your room and nobody bothers you all day, and it's a great gift.
Huh.
So other than the outside world keeps breaking in with news and angst, and I mean, other than that, which brings us all together, I think there's no way to escape the community of shared worry. But I suppose one of my friends posted on Facebook a few days ago a photograph she had taken as she and her husband were driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. And in the photograph, you see the superstructure of the bridge and you see the part of the road that they're on. And ahead of them, in the middle of the bridge, is a white cloud of fog. That's all you can see ahead is this white fog. And she said, this is what we're facing now. You can't see the road ahead. But I think that's what we're always facing. We've never been able to. We believed that we could see it, but that was a myth that we taught ourselves, that it's always that fog ahead, and we always just have to trust that we can take the next step. Yeah.
So in many ways, what's happening now is that the conditions of our existence that have always been true have been revealed or have been magnified, let's say.
Yes, I think so. Yes, I think so. We are learning something that we have over generations unlearned. But the truth of that has not changed, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it also sounds like for those people fortunate enough to have a richly developed inner life, poets, for example, people who spend time, are used to spending time on their own, writing or thinking or contemplating. This isn't so much of a stretch. And it sounds like in many ways you're fortunate to have a habit of mind that allows you to access this time with relative comfort.
Yes, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah.
I've always spent a lot of my time daydreaming on the couch. And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Well, poets and preachers alike, I think, spend a lot of time daydreaming. So that feels resonant for me as well. Well, I'm wondering if we can just dig into the content of our conversation. Maybe let me just ask you about this. What do you think are the importance of words and poetry right now? Maybe literature generally, but words also in general, but poetry in particular. What would you say about that? Why poetry now? Where do you go with that?
Poetry, I think, originated in a kind of urge to cast spells, to make something happen in the world. And when you're shaping language, at least the kind of poetry that I work toward and believe in is shaped language. And I think you're shaping language so that when you put it out into the world, it has a life beyond just the life of ordinary spoken language. We say words all the time. We talk all the time, but those are just words we throw away. But poetry is an attempt to create a language that lives beyond that moment of speaking. It's something that offers solace, I think, because it tells us that we too can have lives beyond the moment of, speaking our lives. We have the possibility of reaching a kind of, I don't know, the immortality of art.
Yeah. So the notion that we have that possibility within us, that the poem is a piece of us, and it reveals a capacity that we too carry within us.
I think so. Yeah. Hoping for, yes.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that I don't know, you had come across something from Joy Harjo, who is the U.S. Poet Laureate at the moment. Remind me what she said. Like what?
Just find it. I got it in an email a few minutes ago. It's a It's an interview in the Christian Science Monitor. Okay. It's an interview in the Christian Science Monitor, and this is the part that I found relevant. The question is, you have to describe poetry as a conversation of the soul. How is poetry soul talk? And Joy says, I'm going to read this, it's kind of embarrassing. Joy says, just about every poet out there, from Walt Whitman to Emily Dickinson to Marilyn Nelson.
No, really?
She honestly says this.
Oh my gosh.
Ultimately writing a conversation with their soul. Each one has a different patterning, of course, a kind of sound frequency you can hear. And every poem has poetry ancestors. My own poetry ancestors include a great-grandfather who helped me enter the realm of poetry. He was a good speaker, and I think some of my sense of language comes from him. I have some of his handwritten pages of sermons.
Wow.
I also consider Emily Dickinson a forebear. I hear her in her phrasing, a single human voice rising from the seclusion of a room, or darkness, or loneliness.
Yes.
The whole country seems to be in that kind of place right now. So quiet, you can hear the collective heart.
Wow.
We might feel especially alone because we have been individually isolated. We don't know what's going to happen next. All sound becomes magnified. That's when we can really listen. And then, I don't know, it goes on to asking, why is listening important? I'll read this one last thing. Listening is the tool required for life and for any art. It doesn't matter if it's literature, painting, or architecture. You might listen with your eyes to color or to the line or just shape. But it's all about listening with all of your senses. This is Leof, by the way.
Well, hi Leof.
Okay. Anyway, I thought it just arrived, and she's a wonderful, brilliant soul teacher, I think. And I was very pleased to receive it. I'm really honored that she mentions me.
Well, congratulations for that. I think that's such a wonderful shout out to you. I do want to linger on that one line that she says about like the poetry as, or she was referring to Emily Dickinson, I think, but the poet is this soul, or is this voice emerging from loneliness or from an isolated room, or I think that's a beautiful
human voice rising from the seclusion of a room or darkness or loneliness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder what sort of voices we need to be listening for in this particular moment, arising from out of our collective loneliness, our personal loneliness, and what sorts of things might shake loose um, within our lives, within our hearts, within our culture, if we can but listen right now.
I don't know. For me, one of the tests of poetry is whether it seems to be expressing wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a test that we should hold poems up to. There are probably almost 1,000 graduate programs in creative writing right now, and everybody wants to be a poet, but I don't think that necessarily means that people have learned wisdom. I think wise poetry probably requires some life experience. There's a wonderful passage from Rilke about what it takes to be a poet. I used to have it as a poster on the door of my office. It's a long paragraph about what the poet needs to experience before an individual can claim to be a poet. A list of things like he should be in the room when a child is being born. He should witness somebody's spirit leaving him in death. He should work with his hands doing something. It's all about a male poet. But I think it's really a good point, and it requires more than just sitting in a classroom writing exercises. And sorry, this is one of my strong red flags. I think it requires serious thought and seriousness of intent in experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, suddenly we've all been thrust into this situation of deep seriousness and deep gravity. And it's a situation that I think calls forth some of our most reflective thinking. And so who knows what sort of poetry may emerge from this particular moment.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see that. I don't think we'll see it immediately, but 10 years from now, the literature of the world will be different.
Yes.
Everything will be different because
Yes.
not ours, but the planet.
I like to think it will be an occasion for the deepening of our humanity, the deepening of our soul, the deepening of our emotional life. We shall see. We shall see. My greatest fear right now is that we'll go through this moment and it will return us to life as usual. Instead of being an invitation to really think carefully about who we are and what it is that we value and what sorts of people we would like to be. So I have the sense that poetry is an invitation to use this time productively and to use it well as a kind of soul conversation in the way that Joy Harjo described.
Yeah. At the time, unfortunately, the bookstores are not as available, but it's a time now to make a list of poetry books to read. And one thing that I made a note of that I wanted to recommend here is poets.org, which is the website of the Academy of American Poets. Poets.org puts out a poem a day as an email. And some of them, the quality varies, but sometimes they're really good. And you can go to that website and subscribe to a poem a day and just get it. A poem a day, free. And yesterday or the day before, the poem was describing, the poet is in the waiting room of like Midas Muffler, and he's just describing the people who are in the waiting room. And he says he really admires the stapler on the cashier's desk because it works like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Because what a poem does is to put together disparate impressions, memories from one time, and staple them together into something that has meaning. It's really such a nice poem. And then he makes a list of the things that he's stapling together into this poem. I wish I had it right now. I posted it on Facebook because I was very touched by the familiarity. I mean, it's right there in that waiting room.
Yes.
And by the use of the metaphor of the stapler as the poem, and how the poem presents you things that you know, but by putting them together, gives them a meaning beyond what they had previously had. I mean, we experience life without even thinking about it, but the poem takes those things and by putting them together elevates them into into real meaning.
Right, right. Well, what I love about that story, in addition to the metaphor of the stapler, is that it's an example of using empty time productively. I mean, where most of us sit in a waiting room at, let's say, the DMV, or let's say, you know, getting our oil changed at whatever this place was. What was it? The Michelin?
He doesn't name it, but for me, it was like Midas Muffler.
Midas Muffler. Okay, yeah. So most of us use that time, and I don't know, just flip through our phones or discard the time. This is an example of using this kind of found moment, which is for most people empty time, and using it productively, creatively, imaginatively, to think through the ways in which a stapler might suggest deep meaning.
Some years ago, I read something about the expression "killing time."
Mm-hmm.
We spend our lives killing time. What do we emerge with? We kill our time. Our time is the only time we have. Why do we want to kill it? Don't we want to hold on to it? Don't we want to elevate it into something? Why? Yeah, just toss it away like that. And this is a time too. It's not an easy time, but it's not a time that we should kill.
Yes.
I think it's a time that we should use. You said this in one of your recent sermons, I think. Take up something, to play, practice a musical instrument, make something, create something. I spent some time, I don't have a sewing machine now, but I spent some time last night making face masks. And what a good thing. It felt really, I don't know what to do with them, but I happened to discover in my sewing kit some swatches of cotton fabric. I don't know why I had bought it, but why not use it?
Why not? I mean, that seems to me to be, I don't know, to be a deeply poetic response to this. Why not use it the way one would use a stapler? Why not use this fabric and make something? Why not use this time and do something? I can't remember the name of the author or the book, but the phrase sticks with me, and I've used it in reference to religion, but it actually comes from a poet who says the poet's task is to mesmerize time. The poet's task is to mesmerize time. And I feel like the same thing is true for those of us in the business, or let's not call it the business, the practice of religion, the practice of ritual, ceremony, theology. But maybe it would be best to broaden it farther still and to say a human being's task, to be alive. Our task is to mesmerize time rather than frittering it away, rather than killing it, rather than wasting it. Our task can be to mesmerize the time and to elevate it.
Right.
Anyway, that's one of the reasons I turned to poetry. but it's also one of the reasons I chose to work in the field that I did in religion, because I think the task of religion is to mesmerize time as well.
Mesmerize, wonderful word for it.
It is a wonderful word. It is a wonderful word. But it turns out that I think that's the task that's before all of us right now. It's been magnified. So, all right, let's turn the conversation this way. I know that having heard Joy Harjo's shout out to you, I think we should hear some of your poetry, actually. And so when we talked earlier in the week, I wondered if you might be willing to share your poetry or other poems that have been meaningful to you. And I know that you've selected a few of your own poems, which I think are wonderful. So I'm wondering if you would just read one for us now. I don't know how many we'll have time to read, but why don't we start, I don't know, choose one and share it with us.
Yeah, well, asking a poet to read a poem is like asking a grandparent if they have photos of the grandchildren. I had the thought that it might be good to start with something light. And so I'm going to read something light. It was written specifically for a program, an anthology about wishes. It's for an organization called the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay, so this is about wishing. It's called Cautious Wishing. And I think, well, you'll see the relevance. Cautious Wishing.
Cautious Wishing.
It's for an anthology for children.
Okay.
Say you've trapped an elf or caught a magic fish. Beware of greed, ambition, and desire. When it offers you anything your heart can wish, just free it, because wishes can backfire. If you wish every meal will be a sumptuous feast, you could wind up having to diet to lose weight. If you wish unwisely, in anger or in haste, you just might destroy every good thing you create. We're all living with side effects unforeseen by the science that wished us forward toward new frontiers. The 13-year-olds who wished they were 19 are too soon 50 and lamenting the passing years. And the girl who wished her golden retriever could talk has to listen to his detailed monologue about peas and poops he encounters on every walk, because a talking dog is still a dog. I used to wish my dog could talk.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love that closing image, but I was also really struck, and I imagine this had to be on your mind when you chose the poem, about that image of be careful of wishing. It had to do with science and the ways in which science has unleashed a kind of progress that may or may not lead us well.
I mean, we wanted to travel. We wanted to see the world. Now, every country that has an airport is suffering. The countries that don't have, that are not places that people want to go, they're the ones that are safer. Don't want to be in Italy, don't want to be in places in Europe where people want to go. Anyway, I just feel that our wishes have led us to this impasse. It's not an impasse. We'll pass it. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first poem I wanted to read.
Well, it's a wonderful poem. And yeah, I do want to backtrack, and I don't want to single out. I actually want to elevate scientists in this moment and thank them for all of their clear-headed analysis in this particular moment. But I do think that there's a wider question about a kind of chain of progress that we've been following that maybe we need to backtrack from at this moment.
I think we need to think about it.
Yeah.
We need to think about the trajectory that we've been on. Maybe we need to alter it. I think it's not too late. I have faith that it's not too late to.
Yeah. So the other day when we talked, you mentioned this quote that I loved and I wrote down. I think, do you remember? It was there is no frigate like a book.
Oh, there is no frigate like a book.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote that. It's on the preface of the book of poems I grew up with as a child. And yeah, there is. Oh, because I was saying that everybody wants to travel now.
Yeah.
And gosh, I remember when that was not something you could dream of. It was too expensive for one thing, to fly. And just imagine going to live in some place far away and never being able to go back. I was in Ireland once a few years ago, and pretty much everybody I met had family in other places in the world. And, you know, there were people who, there was not enough food. And so the family of 8 children, 6 of them had to leave, and they would get on a ship and go away, and their family would never see them again. Maybe they'd get a letter once every couple of years, but that was it. And now it's so easy. Everybody is off. But I remember those wonderful books about travel, or remember stereopticons? I think that's what they're called. These things that had a clicking thing, and you would see scenes in 3D.
Yeah.
How thrilling it was to look at things like that.
Yeah.
They don't exist now. What we get now are selfies of people standing in front of, here I am in front of the, I don't know, some cathedral in France. Here I am. I remember seeing, one of my friends told me that he was traveling once in Austria, I think, and he heard an American couple strung with cameras say, okay, you do the inside and I'll do the outside. And that's what travel has become, you know?
Yeah.
Crossing things off a list, not experiencing them, not taking them in.
Right. Well, it's an example of cautious wishing, and being careful what we wish for, and having all of these places open and accessible to us, so readily available. We wind up turning it into cheapening the experience on one hand.
Crowds on Mount Everest.
I know.
Crowds on Mount Everest. So many people that some of them die and are left behind. Crowds.
Yeah. That was a staggering image from this past, when was it? Summertime, I guess it was. I think it was sometime around May that image came out. It seemed indicative of another kind of pandemic unleashed upon the world.
Consumerism also was just.
Yes. So cautious wishing. I mean, I kind of hesitate to ask this question because it's too big, but do you have a sense of what it might be useful to wish for right now? What it might be worthwhile to wish for right now?
Well, I guess one hopes that the first world, not the third world, but the first world that we belong to, will learn the lesson in this, or the lessons plural. There are a lot of lessons being offered to us, and I hope we are willing to learn them. I'm afraid we're so used to having everything given to us. We get mad if God doesn't give us what we ask for in our prayer. Please give me this. Please give me that. What's wrong with you? Why didn't you give it to me? And I hope we learn that sometimes the right answer to prayers is no. You know, that's a really hard lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That's a powerful insight, and a powerful wish in a way. I don't know if you would call it a wish, but the desire for us all to learn that sometimes the best answer is no. Yeah. Well, cautious wishing. I think that's a great poem to begin with. Do you want to do another one? Do you want to read another one?
Let me see what else do I have. Yes, I picked a couple of poems about giving thanks, because I think that's something else we could learn, is that, yeah, we're in a really difficult time. I mean, frankly, as an African American, I've always felt lucky to have forebears who lived through so much pain, like being a child of a Holocaust survivor. Lucky because that means it puts everything into a much more positive perspective. It makes you thankful for things. You don't have filet mignon, but you have food. Give thanks for the food. You know, that's how I was raised. So yes. I picked some poems of Thanksgiving, and poems that are also about solitude. And one of the things that I've been doing here alone in my house is, I'm also an OCD cleaner. So this is about dusting. I've been cleaning my house. So this is a poem about dusting. And it's about what dust consists of, that we should be aware of it, that dust is something. So, okay. Thank you for these tiny particles of ocean salt, pearl necklace viruses, winged protozoans, for the infinite, intricate shapes of submicroscopic living things, for algae spores and fungus spores, bonded by vital mutual genetic cooperation, spreading their inseparable lives from equator to pole. My hand, my arm make sweeping circles. Dust climbs the ladder of light. For this infernal, endless chore, for these eternal seeds of rain, thank you for dust. So I read someplace that dust is full of life, and that if you can't wash, if there's no water, you can wash with dust, that it's clean. It's one of the cleanest things on the planet. And third, that's in the poem, we would have no rain without dust. Clouds have to be seeded with dust in order for rain to fall. So dust is absolutely necessary. And it's one of the many things we want to get rid of. We want to destroy, like weeds. Let's get rid of all of that. Oh, bugs, give me some bug spray. All of these necessary things that are a part of the whole living being of the planet.
Yes.
We need to recognize their necessity and be thankful that they exist along with us. Yeah.
I mean, that takes me to a lot of different places as you were reading that. When you talked about these, I think the phrase was these infernal living spores, something like that.
This infernal endless chore, these eternal seeds of rain, infinite intricate shapes of submicroscopic living things. That's probably
Submicroscopic living things. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the situation that we're all afraid of right now? These submicroscopic living things that might pervade the air between us, that might exist on our skin, that might exist on other surfaces, that we're walling ourselves up in our houses in order to fend off, rightly so. Rightly so.
Yes, right now we have an enemy out there. It's the enemy. My late mother-in-law used to call cockroaches the enemy. She wouldn't say the word. She would say, there were some enemies in there. But the submicroscopic world is not all against us.
Yes.
It's also necessary, like the flora or inside our bodies, in our intestines. And we can't live without those. Eating probiotic yogurt.
Right.
To keep those living things alive. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the ways in which we've all been kind of obsessively cleaning right now. And again, kind of walling ourselves off in our homes, and washing our hands and using the gels and things like that to kill these maybe unseen microbes that that are dangerous to us. I wonder if I wonder if there's a possibility of shifting our perspective somehow, even as we do those things necessarily, to understand these unseen elements as something of a gift that may wind up protecting us in some way, that may end up, ultimately inoculating us in some way. I don't know. This is just where my mind went, and
one of the two thoughts I have. One of them is that we have become so afraid of bacteria that we're always using antibacterial soap and taking antibiotics and injecting cattle with antibiotics, and that's bad. It turns out that we need bacteria, that we don't want to destroy them. And the other thought I had, I've lost it already. That's the way my mind is.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Sorry, that's so frustrating though.
Well, it's okay. Let it be a moment.
I don't know what it was. I think the movie The War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
When the Earth is invaded by aliens who are killing everybody, isn't it bacteria? Something that saves the planet? It's something like a virus or something that makes the aliens sick and kills them off, and therefore saves all life on the planet. I'm pretty sure that's the plot, the function of that movie. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Well, it might also be that microbial life which will save us too.
It could be. It could very well be.
Yeah. Anyway, it's helpful and inviting to be able to think along those lines, to think about all the living things that are contained in dust and the ways in which we need it, the ways in which we need those microbes, and the productive work they might be doing, even, even as we rid our homes of it, obsessively, compulsively. Yeah. Well, thank you for that one. Yeah, I wanted to ask, this is just a sideline question. And again, maybe an unfair question. Are there, one of the columns that I follow most regularly in the New York Times is that column by the book, where they ask, writers, what do you read? And what are the things on your nightstand? And what are your writing habits? And what are the books that most informed you as a child? And all this, I love looking at that. I love hearing from those other writers about what's important to them. So I don't know, if I could ask a quick, like, by the book sort of question. I'm wondering if there are poets working today that that you turn to often, or that you think about as helpful in a moment like this. I mean, we mentioned Joy Harjo before.
Right.
I guess the risk of this is, having you name people and then obviously not name others. And
that's the word I don't remember. Yeah.
You mentioned Derek Walcott in an earlier conversation when we were.
Right. Yeah, I don't go too much to Walcott.
Yeah.
Good poet. Patty Ann Rogers is a poet who writes about physics.
Yeah.
She's a poet who's really interested in science and putting together science and religion. And I very much admire her work.
Yeah.
Camille Dungy, who is an African-American poet interested in science and ecology and nature and things. She's going in a very different direction, a very interesting, promising direction, I think. Carolyn Forche, who is always writing poetry of witness. What's the name of the, what's her name? The poet who lived on the Cape. She died about 5 years ago. She wrote a lot of nature poems about. My memory is very spotty.
Well, again, let it be a moment of shared, shared, I don't know, humanity. Who would that be? Mary Oliver?
Thank you. Yes, Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
And Merwin, William Merwin is also a great poet of insight and great wisdom, I think.
Yeah. Well, those are some great names. I'm intrigued that two of them that you chose, science and religion, science and ecology, are the kind of guiding forces.
Yes, I think those are the poets we all need to read.
Yes.
To bring us to an awareness of our place. We don't need to be told that we are at the top of the great scale of great chain of being. We need to be showed that we are a part of everything.
Yes.
Of things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Another book, this is not a book of poetry, but it's a book that I found it very moving. It's by Daniel Quinn. It's called Ishmael.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Everybody was reading it about 20, 25 years ago, and then disappeared. And I think it still has a lot to say. That it's something that we need to return to.
That's great. Yeah, I remember that 20 years ago, 25. Yeah, I guess 20 years ago. Everybody was reading that book. It was on every bookshelf of every home that I entered.
Really?
I was a student back then. Everybody had that book on their shelves. And I never read it. I wish I had. And maybe now's the time. Of course, now you walk into people's homes and nobody has bookshelves, which is another,
Yes.
which is another story. But
I visited a university campus once where they had read that book as their freshman experience
no kidding.
novel,
Huh.
and the students had raised money to. It's about a gorilla,
Yeah.
a lowland gorilla that is a teacher,
Yeah.
and the students at this university had raised enough money to have a sculpture of a gorilla put in a little park on the campus. There in a little woods, there is a gorilla that is Ishmael for them. I really loved that. Yeah.
Well, well, in a way, it's another one of these poetic moments where a vision or an image captures people's imagination for a particular amount of time and causes them to do extraordinary and extravagant things like fund the creation of a statue of a gorilla. Hey, well, I'm mindful. I could do this all day. It's fun to talk to you. It's fun to just.
It's gonna have to do a lot of editing.
It's fun to just kind of let the conversation roll. But why don't we do another one of your poems? Let's do one more, and then I'm also mindful that you have written a poem for the occasion. So this is like a world premiere. A Sacred Conversations exclusive to FCCOL of Marilyn Nelson's new drop. Dropping a new song on us, dropping a new poem on us. So let's save that for the kind of our parting word. But let's do another one of your poems and then see where that goes, and then we'll go into the final one.
This is a poem about a little fantasy about what I think poetry can bring to people's lives.
Yeah.
And it starts, for me, it started with an image one of my friends, who is also a poet, had, in which she imagined herself dancing on a tightrope and risking her life. And underneath her are the poetry readers who are with their breath held, waiting for her to fall and kind of wishing she would fall. Mine it started with that, but it doesn't go to the same place. It's imagining the poet as, well, I'll just read it. But it's about poetry. It's not about, okay. It's called Confessional Poem.
Mm.
And I think you could imagine the poem going into the world of somebody who's sequestered right now, at home with a lot of young children, going crazy, being overwhelmed by the situation. That's what it's about. Okay, it's called Confessional Poem. Mm-hmm. This friend of mine says she'd like to visit the lonely young mother she's seen in a fourth floor window. She'd climb the unswept stairs and whisper a word. The locks would click and the apartment door would open. There, in the overheated air and the turbulence of children, she'd stand, the fat lady suit hanging from her shoulders like a sandwich board. She'd strip off the fake rabbit coat, a goodbye, and dance around in the bargain basement house dress. She'd undo the dress snap by snap, all the while eyeing the youngest baby, eyeing the doorway to the john. Under the house wet dress, she'd wear a black nylon slip with a side seam ripped out. She says she'd wiggle the hips and wink at no one in particular as the oldest baby pulled the middle baby's hair and the youngest disappeared through the bathroom doorway. She'd raise the slip like an opera curtain, ripple the cellulite thighs, and shimmy her shoulders to open the diaper pin closing the back of the bra. By now, the young mother would have left the sooty window. She'd sit laughing on the sofa, jiggling a baby on her knees. And my friend says she'd dance in the Zeppelin glory of the Melanie breasts, the magnificent girth, the silver and auburn stretch marks on the belly like a night of northern lights. She'd lift her arms and twirl like a ballerina, then swing her elbows and tap like a dancing fool. Heavy and beautiful, the young mother would get up and join her, her pregnancy big as an extra silhouette. In the faint cloud of dust they raised, the middle baby would bend and straighten its knees, dancing in its heavy diaper. The oldest would throw back its head and whirl, whirl. From the bathroom, the youngest, hearing laughter, would leave a wet trail, then sit up and clap happy hands. Then I'd strip off the fat lady's suit and dance on like a blaze of sunlight. So I'm just imagining that the poem is there in the middle of that strip, in the middle of that striptease. It's the poem that's left there. It's the poem that has done this, that has made this mother laugh, that has raised her above the oppression of her life for a moment of laughter and dancing together with all of these babies. That's the poem doing that. I don't know if anyway, that's that poem.
Well, I almost hesitate to even break in and speak to it because for me, it cast an incredible spell. You said earlier that poems were meant to do a kind of spell casting or to, we talked about mesmerizing time. I thought that poem, I hope other people experience it this way too. It was a sort of blessing, a blessing of all of us especially all of us as parents, cooped up inside with our kids and doing our best. And I don't know, it spoke to the deep needs that many of us feel right now, at least that I feel.
Thanks.
Yeah, the poem is a blessing. The poem is a striptease meant to make us laugh and give us relief and to give us light.
Yeah, we're all in this. We're all in this together, and let's find the humor and the joy and the do-do of it. We need to not forget the do-do. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you for that one. Yeah, in a way, I feel like that's a showstopper. I hope that other people who are watching this, listening to this, especially parents, I see this line saying my internet connection is unstable, but I hope that other people experience that the way that I did, as this magic spell cast into the moment.
Hope it won't be too racy, too. Yeah.
Oh, and we need raciness now too. In our isolation and our inability to touch, perhaps we need raciness. I say that as a minister. concerned about souls and bodies of people. Well, listen, you've got this world premiere.
Yes, I'd like to read my world premiere poem.
Yeah, let's hear it. I am excited to hear it, and I'm excited to have you share it with everybody who's watching on this venue. So thanks for, I don't know, getting up early whenever you got up to write it. And
the poem of this morning. It's a kind of a riff on Whitman's poem, I Hear America Singing.
Uh-huh.
And it's called I Hear Humanity Singing. Excuse me. I hear humanity singing. The million-fold canticles I hear. Those of the planet's humans, each one singing theirs as it should be, has always been. The healthcare worker singing theirs as they fight on the front lines for life. The grocery store cashier singing theirs as they hand a receipt with a smile. The mail deliverer singing theirs as they lug mountains of catalogs. The distance teacher singing in an improvised home office. The teller singing as they strap on a mask and enter the bank. The trucker singing behind the wheel. The journalist singing as they chase truth. The singing of parents and children together. The singing of the lovelorn, the lonely. The song of the hungry. The song of the poor. Each singing what belongs to them, as unique as their death. Yesterday, today's song. Today, the song of tomorrow. The young, old, brave, afraid, singing with heads thrown back, the strong song of hope.
Man.
Thank you, Walt Whitman.
That is, but what a gorgeous set of words. What a gorgeous poem. What a gorgeous statement. For now, those are words that I think we need, we profoundly need. Words of gratitude, really, for all of those folks out there who are singing each in their own unique way. The hospital workers and the grocery workers and the mailmen and the parents and everybody who's singing each in their way. It reminds me of that image that all of us have seen now, probably many times, of all those people in Italy singing across their balconies to each other. But I think in a way that's a vision of what all of us are doing right now, each in our way.
I think so. It's what we have to do.
Yeah.
It's what we have to do for ourselves and for each other, to find our own celebration, our own way of celebrating. And we're here. Yes. We're still here. We never know how long we're going to be here. We've never known that. A piano could fall out of the sky on us, but we're here. And in this moment we're given, our job is to sing. Our job is to celebrate and give thanks. So,
amen.
Yeah.
Amen. That speaks deeply to where I am right now. I hope it speaks deeply to where other people are. I also hope it's an invitation to sing, to celebrate in this moment that we do have, because as you say, we are still here. Well, I think we should bring this conversation to a close. Not that I want to. I could keep it going for a much longer time, but for the sake of I don't know, just the bookending the conversation, I do want to say thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for sharing these wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous, revelatory poems for us. And thank you for this world premiere poem. I think it's exactly what all of us are in deep need of right now. We can concentrate on statistics. We can concentrate on predictions. We can concentrate on all sorts of words, but I think it's poetic words, and especially the kinds of poetic words that you've been offering for us over the course of the last, however long we've been talking, 45 minutes to an hour, that we most deeply need right now. That's the kind of discourse that I sense profound hunger for. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for sharing it, and thank you just for your presence right now. It's such a joy to talk to you. Well, to all of you who are out there, thanks for watching this. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. And I want to say that I hope that you, each in your own way, are singing your songs, singing the songs that emerge from your own humanity, whatever they might look like right now. All of those songs matter, and they matter profoundly. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that we here at FCCOL love you. And I hope that you're going to be okay and going to keep on doing okay. And I hope that you'll turn to some poetry, some of the poems that Marilyn has shared and offered, some of the poets that she has suggested, and maybe that you'll tune into poets.org on a daily basis for a daily window into this form of discourse, which we all of us need right now. Be well. Love in this time of Corona. We love you, and we'll see you soon. Bye.